Hello and welcome to YHTV's Trinity of Life. This is episode 44. I'm Christina Suzama, your host for this program. Thank you so much for joining me again as I continue to explore the wonderful world of healing arts, meditation, therapies, and the many modalities of helping us find balance in our individual journeys. We're always excited to meet those who are on the leading edge of creating change on this planet. At any time during this live presentation, you can feel free to ask a question or make a comment by scrolling down on your screen and typing it into the comment box right there. And click submit, and I will read your comment or question to our special guest. Or if you prefer to ask the question yourself, you are very welcome to dial in and join the chat on our conference line. The number there is 323-476-3672. Again, 323-476-3672. The ID is 607393#. 607393#. And during the show, you will see that flash up on screen as well. Now, our guest today is an individual who has been a part of the Yoga Hub faculty since 2011 Virtual World Yoga and Meditation Conference. He specializes in ADD and ADHD. That has been for the past 18 years or so. And he has actually continued to broaden his, like most of our doctors, has continued to broaden his areas into alternative medicine, integrative medicine. Continues to support children, adolescents, and adults to find balance in their lives. I'd like us all to welcome Dr. Kenny Handelman.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina.
Well, thank you for honoring us again. But this time it's for all the public, which is so wonderful to share you with them.
Well, thank you. It's exciting to be on an internet TV show. I love it. Thank you.
Yes, and you are in Canada, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes, good old Canucks.
Just outside of Toronto. Yeah.
Oh, good. We have to come and visit you out there.
Sure. Love to have you.
Now, how's your weather out there? I know it's so interesting to find out what's going on in everyone's area that they come from.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You know, we're sort of just above freezing right now, but there's still a lot of snow on the ground. So don't laugh that hard. You used to live in Canada, too.
I know. But I don't think we had, on the West Coast, I don't think we had as strong winters like you do back east.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. But hey, maybe you should be visiting us down here in LA right now. We're complaining at 60 degrees.
Yeah.
So Kenny, can you share a little bit of your background with our audience? Because when you did, of course, the Yoga Hub conference, that was all, a very specialized audience that was a part of the conference. Now we're in the main community and globally. And if you could share your background and...
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. So I'm a psychiatrist. I went through medical school at the University of Toronto and then went into psychiatry. And when I went into psychiatry, when I hit the chance to work with kids and teens, I just loved it, and the opportunity to work with kids and teens, help them get their lives on track. And if they're struggling emotionally, behaviorally, psychologically, something like that, I felt if I could help them early on and help them get more on track and help to support their families, it makes a big difference over the long run. So that was very meaningful for me. So I specialized in child and adolescent psychiatry, and ADHD is just so, prominent and so common in child and adolescent psychiatry. So I started doing a lot of work with ADHD. Then I eventually found out that I have it myself, after my medical training. So no wonder I got along so well with all those kids and teens and their families, because I kind of related. I participated in the Yoga Hub event a couple of years ago because working with ADHD, I really do keep open to a lot of the alternative treatments that are out there. Many physicians get their education through pharmaceutical-funded events and don't always, they often just have sort of a flat answer that any integrative or holistic approach to ADHD or any mental health problem is just, there's no data, there's no research, forget about it. Well, the research has actually been climbing. So I was thrilled to join with your group a couple years ago, and now I'm thrilled to be back. The difference now is, as I've told you, I'm actually doing yoga now. So,
my goodness, congratulations!
For the past 2-3 months. So now I have a whole new respect and enjoyment for yoga and the benefits it can bring.
Oh, wow. Good for you. Good for you. Because I know that they've found it's helped people on all levels of life. I mean, from the depression to the, ADD, ADHD, which, my gosh, it's like household words, really. It's like
Yeah,
crazy.
well,
Help us here. Why has it become like that? People are like, people throw those words around and it really bothers me because in my world of healing arts, the language that we use is very powerful.
Absolutely.
I mean, really, everywhere I turn, I hear conversations that oh, it's depression, oh, it's ADD, oh, it's ADHD. Help us out with that, Kenny. What's going on?
Well, I think really we're in a situation where there's a lot more awareness about ADHD, and I'd like to say that generally speaking, the people who are getting diagnosed really have the condition. Okay. I'm not sure if that's 100% the case. And I'm actually a little more concerned about that in the US than I am in Canada insofar as overdiagnosis. But before we get into that problem, let's just discuss what this is. So when people have, and when we can talk about ADHD, but of course we can talk about mental health in general and other sorts of things. But when people have ADHD, essentially what's going on is there are two main areas of struggle. One is trouble with focus. So people get distracted, have trouble following through, often lose things or disorganized, a whole range of symptoms like that. And then there are symptoms about hyperactivity and impulsivity, fidgety, restless, can't sit still, or impulsive, acting without thinking, and that sort of thing. And people can have, now, everybody, of course, can get distracted, or everybody can be impulsive or restless. But when people have a critical number of symptoms occurring much more regularly than they should at their age of development, whether they're 10 or 20 or 50, right? But if they have a lot more symptoms than the norm, then they can be in the clinical range. People can have either just the can't focus symptoms, so that's ADHD inattentive type, or ADD, as it used to be called, or people can have just the hyperactive impulsive type, or they can have the combined where they have both. People will often say, no, I just have ADD, meaning just the not focusing, or ADHD, meaning they also have the hyperactivity, impulsivity symptoms.
Does that mean I'm ADHD?
I don't know. Why? Are you fidgety and restless?
I bounce on my ball all the time.
That's probably just healthy, right? It's a good point because everybody has some symptoms. And if anybody's going through a particular stressful time, like if a teenager's parents are getting divorced or something, they may have, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 symptoms. And when you're over 6, it's considered a concern. But they may have it just for a short time while the divorce is going on or while there's stress and strain, but they may balance out. And to have ADHD, you really have to have the symptoms for years, like going back into childhood. So, I feel confident that when people use the diagnosis properly, when they do a proper assessment, that we really identify people who actually have it and can benefit from treatment. The concern is that there are doctors who do the 5-minute assessment, oh, you're not focusing in school, here's a prescription, try some Ritalin, and it turns into a quick diagnosis and a quick prescription. And that's a big concern because there's a lot of research that lots of treatments can help ADHD, including medication, but also including lots of non-medication things. And it's important to remember we do live in what I consider to be, sort of an ADD-ogenic society, like ADD causing society. That, we sit around with our smartphones and, constantly texting and Facebook and Twitter. And, we never sort of sit and pay close attention to something and be absorbed in it for a long time. And so that can create almost a pseudo ADD, that people are so stressed and scattered that they almost act as if they have ADHD. But if a proper assessment is done, most of those people don't really have it. They need to stop, get grounded, be present, and maybe, not check their email every 3 minutes. But it's not truly ADHD.
That's a great point because, we are in this whole technology age right now where, people don't even look up to cross the street or walk through a parking lot. It's quite amazing. It's like, hello, anybody home?
The thing I find most sort of funny and disturbing at the same time is when I go into a public men's room I see men standing in the John with their cell phone in one hand and busy with their other hand. It's like, can you not take like 30 seconds to go to the bathroom without checking your email or Twitter or something?
Well, I got to tell you, I sure hope they wash those phones along with their hands.
Absolutely.
Now you've got me a little bit, borrowing someone's phone or something. I'm a little bit hesitant now.
Sanitize, right?
Oh my. Yeah, it is quite disturbing. And how I know in the middle schools and everything, how the teachers actually have to take away everyone's phones at the door. It's like, check in your phone and you can pick it up after class.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for clarifying ADD and ADHD, because, that's always, it's always a very common, because when people hook into a word, they think they know enough to be dangerous. That's what I say. And they just start to throw it around as like, oh, that child's got this, or that person is that. And it's like, oh, slow down. Yeah. So you have spent so much time in that area, and recently you have just gotten your certification in integrative medicine.
Yes.
And what made you do that? What made you kind of expand in that direction?
Right. So I recently took the American Board of Integrative and Holistic Medicine board exams and was successful, which was exciting. I've been interested in integrative and holistic or alternative medicine, complementary medicine for years. But I really, when I was in my training, I made a conscious choice to, stick with the standard medical approach, learn what its benefits are, see what treatments for, the assessment and diagnosis side, but also treatments and opportunities there. And really, I felt I've been in practice almost 13 years, and I felt like, well, I pretty much have a good sense of this stuff. Time to go back and circle around to some of my earlier interests. And I feel, the fact that I've, got a book out on ADHD, I teach internationally, I speak all over the world teaching people about ADHD, and I've got my podcast and whatever. I have a bit of a platform now that, establishes some credibility. So when I start talking about, integrative and holistic stuff, that I feel people will be more accepting and willing to listen, even if they're quite skeptical. And, it's time for me to start, I wanted to learn more and time to start integrating it in what I teach and what I do. So, I did the training and, currently I'm in a hospital-based practice just outside of Toronto, and it's a little hard to start working in all that I want to do in the hospital-based clinic, but I'm working on that and working on changing what I do over time. And it's really just about the fact that medication isn't always the answer. Even when you look at research within ADHD, the best research shows that medication can help, but it works best when it's in combination with other strategies, particularly therapies, behavioral strategies, et cetera. And now there's starting to be research on exercise and, healthy eating and other sorts of things. And it's, for me, it's almost like I see sort of the paradox or the conflict of the fact that, look, our great grandparents knew that if you exercised and you ate well, that was healthy, right? But now we need medical scientific research to tell us it's a good idea to exercise. And then you may do better with your ADHD or your depression or your bipolar disorder or, your dementia or whatever it is, right? Now that there's research and it came out on CNN last week, okay, maybe I should actually exercise, So, there's a lot of wisdom in the older approaches, and providing balance is really important. So, that's part of the reason why I'm thrilled to be here and share this with you.
Wonderful. It's always great to hear, someone who's practiced like in a lot of cases, allopathic medicine, what we call it, and to branch out and actually touch into those other areas, because then it becomes holistic. Then it becomes holistic. And I always say to people, it's not about just the supplements or this
Right.
the herbs, but now and then we do need the pharmaceuticals. We do. I mean, they were created for a reason. It's about the balance. So then it's so interesting because people no longer want to call it alternative medicine or even, integrative. They want to call it holistic medicine now, combining everything. And it seems like you have just ventured into that whole nother area. Now, have you tested any of those strategies that you've learned through the integrative medicine certification?
Well, starting to. It's, I right now in this very moment, it's a little bit of a bind because I'm in a hospital system and it's kind of, I don't quite have the freedom to do in the way I'd like to, and not quite ready to open up my own clinic. So a little bit in limbo. I certainly spend a lot more time. Now, I want to just go back to something you said. You said it's not always about the supplements. And, I want to pick up on that. I'm going to interpret that slightly differently than I think how you meant it. I think you meant it's sometimes you need medicine as well. But when I think about looking at things from a holistic perspective, in a Western medical allopathic sort of Western mindset, we often say symptom A requires remedy B, right? So, depression, Prozac, ADHD, Ritalin, that's sort of like the Western medical approach. But that can also happen within the complementary medicine field where, headache, take this remedy, menstrual cramps, take that supplement. And there certainly is benefit to that. And if people can take a natural approach rather than a pharmaceutical, that's certainly an advantage in many ways, if it works well. At the same time, it's still very reductionistic. It's symptom A, remedy B. Well, what about the stress level? What about, spiritual well-being? What about relaxation, breathing, exercise, sleep, et cetera? And, our society and our daily habits are so out of whack that I think when we stick with remedy A, problem A, remedy B, we're really being very reductionistic and not taking a broad enough perspective. So it is important to be holistic, even if you're talking about supplements. So you do need to step back and look at the bigger picture and look at where are there emotional or psychological hotspots and challenges. Am I really getting the proper rest, the proper nutrition, the proper exercise? Am I grounding and breathing and, getting, grounded at times? So it's also important to think about that.
What's very interesting is I have a lot of parents who, like before my son goes to school, we wake up a little earlier than most people for the reason that we do a morning mile walk. And this what we call our morning mile before he even goes to school, before we jump in the car. And we actually have to, because school is about 7 or 8 miles away from us. So we have to jump in the car and actually drive to school. So we do our morning mile, and we that's the way he starts his day. And a lot of people have said, well, that's so early, that's too early to wake up, etc. And I said, well, it grounds him. It grounds his energies. He gets to eat, we get to talk, we get to chat, and it grounds that individual. I mean, you as a psychiatrist working with children and adolescents, and I mean, my goodness, having a child yourself, seeing the changes that they go through so quickly. What are some of the ways that you would recommend? Because for us to ground, it could be yoga, it could be meditation. I mean, they're out there for us if we choose, we choose to approach them. But how about how would parents work with their children or adolescents to help them ground?
Right. I think it's, what you're doing with your son is incredibly important because it's getting him active. When anybody exercises, not only does it, get their heart pumping better and it's good for cardiovascular health, it also boosts brain chemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, which are all the things that psychiatric medicines boost, right? It helps them sleep better, de-stress better, et cetera. But you're also creating a habit of getting up and moving. I mean, what other time in human history has it been possible to essentially take less than, 300-400 steps a day? People wake up and, walk to the bathroom, walk to the kitchen, walk to their car, drive, walk to the elevator, and, repeat that on the way home. And, basically they've taken so few steps that it's almost insane to suggest they wear a pedometer and try and get 10,000 steps a day, right? And,
well, that's a very good point, Kenny, because I never looked at it that way.
Yeah, well, and really what happens, we live a pro-inflammatory lifestyle, right? So the food we eat, the stress levels, the pollution in the air, lack of sleep, caffeine, nicotine or alcohol or other vices, and lack of exercise, it's pro-inflammatory. And lo and behold, we have a ton of illnesses that are inflammatory, diabetes, even Alzheimer's or dementia, heart disease, etc. Anyways, coming back to your question. So your question was, what can parents do to help their kids? Well, it's whatever works in their family that appeals to their child as well. So for your family, you said it early that he, early on in his life, that he gets up and he goes for a walk and he exercises, and this is part of our routine. That's outstanding, because at some point it's going to get so ingrained in him that if he goes through a phase, maybe in his adolescence or whatever, where he doesn't go for a walk in the morning, it's always going to feel like that's true north. That's where I should be going and what I should be doing. Now, if parents are listening to this and their kids are 12 or 15 or 18 and they haven't done that, that's no problem. But it is worth looking at getting some exercise. Now, sometimes kids love, I'm in Canada, hockey, right? Hockey teams or soccer teams, or, they get involved in track and field. Even kids with ADHD and behavior problems often do great in karate or martial arts, because they're often quite structured, and sensei can, sort of keep them right on track and things like that. But it could be bike riding or skateboarding or whatever it is. But I think it's worth having something in the week, a few times a week, where they're up and moving and going. If it's yoga, wonderful. If it's walking, no problem. If it's hiking in the woods, if it's doing treasure hunts, whatever it is, something to get moving. I think it's worth getting regular bedtime routines. And that most families do this pretty well, but sometimes people struggle with their kids. But it's worth sticking to it and holding it. And if you're having trouble with your child when they're 8 or 10, when they're 14 or 16, they're going to be pushing a lot more. And the other thing is it's worth establishing some limits around screen time. And it's worth starting it early. It's so common that I see kids in my office where, teenagers, where their parents say, he will be on that Xbox for 8 hours every night if I let him. And on weekends, 12 or 14 hours. It's like he almost doesn't even want to get up to go to the bathroom.
I've heard that too.
And it's, like I like video games and I can get a little addicted myself. And, the parents often are surprised when I can talk to their kid about Call of Duty Black Ops 2 with some knowledge, experience. They're often thinking we're going to go to the doctor. He's going to tell you to stop playing video games. They're bad for you. And instead I'm like, well, what level are you? And what's your favorite gun? And oh yeah, I'm only 2nd prestige. Oh, you're 5th. Wow, you're good. What? The parent's jaw hits the floor. And then, I play it because I love it, but it also gives me some credibility when I'm talking to the teen, when I say, look, it's fine to play. It's fun. But you also have to shut it off. You also have to get to bed at a decent time. You can't yell at your parents every time they tell you to shut it off and do some homework or go to sleep. Sometimes kids get into rages, throwing their controllers and losing their tempers. And sometimes they just don't do anything. And they say, I'm socializing. Well, it's true. They have a little headset. They're talking to their friends. They're playing with kids they know. But that's not the same as socializing, like seeing them in real life, face to face. It's not the same as going out and taking a deep breath of fresh air in green space. Well, heaven forbid type of thing, right? So, and there was actually a study when I was taking the integrative medicine training courses. There was a study done that looked at kids, playing in a concrete playground versus kids playing in a green space. And there were much more health benefits when kids were playing in a green space. Now, it was one study. There were some design flaws. But again, we come back to the sort of like our great-great-grandparents' wisdom. Get outside and, be in nature, there's something grounding about it. So, I think it's worth families looking at these things, working on them, and starting them reasonably early. So you set a standard in your home. If the standard has been, we don't really exercise at all, and now your child is 20, what's the chance they're going to be exercising on their own when they're in charge of themselves? A lot less than if you've established some routines that bedtime's important, nutrition's important, exercise is important.
And that's so great that you're saying this, because it's true. I see a lot of parents also who are pushing their teens to do something like exercise, and they themselves don't even do it.
Right.
Wait a minute. How do you expect your child to want to do it when you both are sitting here on the couch, on the television, kind of going, get on the treadmill, and no one else is moving? That's not fair.
And that's been the wonderful gift. My daughter said, well, let's do yoga. And I said, well, she really wanted to do it and asked if I'd do it with her. And I said, okay, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm interested in yoga, but okay. And, as it turns out, I really like it. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to do it with my daughter. And she's 13, so I got to be glad that she wants to spend some time with me. Oh, yeah. Not sure how much longer that's going to last for. Hopefully a long time. But, there may be a few years in there where, I may not be at the top of the priority list. So.
But how great. I mean, something in her innately told her it would be a good thing with all her hormones going at 13 and
Yeah.
all the peer pressure and everything. And she chooses yoga. Oh my gosh, what a gift. And then a gift to you.
Absolutely. It has been. Absolutely. I get a bit sore. These days, it's mostly my shoulders and shoulder blades, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
great
those downward facing dogs, right?
yeah, and the upward dogs.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear that. And the great part about it, kudos to you, because you went with her. You actually supported that and went, whereas I see so many around going, okay, you go, I'll pay for it, you go.
Yeah, but I'm on my own sort of healing process. I got to get in better shape. I got to take better care of myself. And, part of that is bringing things into balance, like having had ADD and not knowing it for many years and, working really hard. And my wife's got some medical challenges and, lots of stress in life, right? And it is really important to establish some routines, get some exercise going, work on diet and everything else. I'm going through it myself. I'm thrilled I'm doing it with my daughter. I mean, it's a wonderful gift.
That's wonderful. So Kenny, this as we speak, I know that the time ticks and goes by so quickly. You have written a book, Attention Difference Disorder, which I was intrigued by the title, and I just really loved the title. I really did, because it's not attention deficit disorder. You have chosen to call it Attention Difference Disorder. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you chose that title?
Right. So first of all, on face value, when I'm working with families and, I'm doing assessment and I say, look, your child or teen has ADHD. Oftentimes the parents will say something like, how can you say he has an attention deficit when in fact he could play Xbox for 12 hours if I let him? He can focus. He doesn't have a deficit in his ability to pay attention. Or they may say when he's reading, or he's doing art or playing with Lego, he can go on for hours. So it's not that he has a deficit in attention. He just doesn't want to focus on homework or math or whatever it is, right? And yes, can be funny that way. But what happens is everybody loves to focus on things they enjoy and has trouble with things they don't enjoy or don't focus as well. But with ADHD, it's almost like when the interest isn't there, the brain doesn't prime enough and there's not enough dopamine and people just shut off. And so I explain that it's not a deficit in attention, it's actually a difference. It's a difference in the ability to regulate attention and to pay attention consistently from one activity to the next. So when somebody doesn't have ADHD, even if they don't love math, when it's math class, they can still pay attention. But when somebody has ADHD, if they love their English teacher, they may do great in English period, and then math comes along and they may just not pay attention at all and get nothing out of it. And so it's really an attention difference. The other part about it is, I think it's really important to think differently about ADHD. There's a challenge when we're telling kids that they have a disorder in their brain, that they are different, their brain doesn't work right, so we're going to treat them and give them pills and help them to focus better. Okay, sure, but at the same time, I've never really felt comfortable with looking at a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or 12-year-old or however old. It's a little easier with an adult, but with a kid, look them in the eyes and say, you've got this disorder in your brain, it doesn't work right, we're going to treat it. Well, I don't know. My experience, even before I knew I had my own ADHD and dealing with that, but it's just people with ADHD have this incredible creativity, viewing the world differently. A little bit of different brain wiring may actually be an advantage in some circumstances. So, I think it's really important to think about differences rather than deficits, to look at people's strengths and abilities. Now, this is not to say that ADHD is so wonderful that it's like a wonderful gift and don't you wish you had it? Well, no. It can cause a lot of problems. But when people get good treatment in place, when they get the help they need and they can get the negative symptoms out of the way, they can actually tap into this creative brain of theirs and do outstanding things. There are people with ADHD. There's study after study showing that in the incarcerated population, up to 50% of people in jail have undiagnosed adult ADHD.
Wow.
But you can also go to major universities and talk to doctors, lawyers, professors, philosophers who are at the tops of their fields who have undiagnosed ADHD. It can be this incredible curse or this incredible blessing. People like Howie Mandel, Ty Pennington, I mean, the guy runs around with a megaphone and tears down a house and rebuilds it in 7 days. I mean, he's got energy, right? He's got ADD. Adam Levine from Maroon 5, Sir Richard Branson. There's a lot of people who've come forward and shared about their ADHD. Michael Phelps as well. And I think that's wonderful to give kids a message. This doesn't mean I've got some brain issue and I'm no good and I'm never going to be okay. Well, no, you can do outstanding things. So it's important to have a different message as well.
Do you think that will begin to change in our society, the way people start to, I mean, it seems like you've started a seed of it to say that it is a difference and not a deficit. And, you know, all these people of, you know, these high caliber faces and role models out there also have a form of it. I mean, do you feel that the society will begin to shift, or the medical society will begin to shift and look at it in that way?
I hope so. I think having, you know, I'll tell you my blunt, honest answer about this. I hope so. I don't know so. You know, when it comes to celebrities coming forward and sharing about it, it helps to destigmatize. And that's tremendously important. So when kids, teens, or their families are dealing with this, they're not dealing with tremendous guilt and shame related to it. They're just going about getting some treatment because, hey, if Howie Mandel has this and I have it, well, hey, that's pretty cool, right? So I think it helps destigmatize. At the same time, we can't undermine the importance of health insurance, diagnostic codes, and payment for, you know, for treatment and disability and medications and insurance. So to get your insurance, you got to have a diagnosis documented, right? And not all doctors feel like, let's look for the strengths and whatever. It's like ADHD code 314 or whatever it is on the ICD coding, and, you know, like, let's give you a prescription and get you on, and you'll get your insurance and you'll get support at school. There's a YouTube video out there by, I think it's Sir Ken Robinson, talking about, it was a TED talk that they did in one of those like drawing whiteboard videos, RSA Animate. And he talks about ADHD and the school system and how he doesn't really believe in ADHD or thinks it's a product of the school system. And while I may not accept his whole argument, he does talk about the rate of diagnosis going up the further east you live in the US. So if you live in California, you have a lower chance of getting an ADHD diagnosis versus New York State. And, you know, he does it in sort of a mocking way to basically, you know, point out that isn't this a bit of a farce? Well, I was at a lecture about 6 months ago where an expert was talking about the different school requirements to get help. And they're much more stringent on the east side of the country than they are in the west. So when students are struggling, their doctors say, well, if I give you the diagnosis, it's more likely you're going to get the support you need. So they are more likely to diagnose.
Oh my gosh.
On the western states, they're more likely to get help even without a diagnosis. So that's probably one of the factors. I don't know if that's the answer or not. So the bottom line is, you know, the medical system, the insurance payments, the ability to get supports relies on a diagnosis. And there are a lot of diagnoses out there, and it's just increasing with every new rendition of the DSM-5, the ICD-10. So, you know, I'd love to say that this is all going to change. I hope that people listening and watching this will help to carry that message and teach other people, and, you know, and spread the message. Like when we talk about illness in general or disorders in general or whatever, you know, if somebody's diagnosed with heart disease, cancer, arthritis, there are some outstanding individuals who take that as an opportunity for personal growth and development to learn. And they may say, my cancer diagnosis has given me a gift of better understanding. I live in the present moment, etc. And that's unbelievable and tremendous. If we look at mental health disorders, because it's in the brain, because it's connected to personality and who we think we are, like I don't identify myself by my joints. So if I get arthritis, I have arthritis, but I identify myself with my brain and my personality. And if I've got ADHD and it interferes with that or it's involved in that, I start to take it personally. I start to identify as that. And that's much harder. So, but because it's within the brain, it can have this flip side. It can have this creativity, this viewing the world differently, out of the box thinking that can be a positive thing. So I hope people take this message and share it out there and help people to realize there's myself, there's other people talking about this and sharing about more of a strength-based approach. And I think it's really important. I don't like the idea that people would be down on themselves and have low self-esteem and guilt and shame related to the fact that their brain's wired differently if that's really the cause of it for ADHD or depression or bipolar or whatever it is.
A question, Kenny. Now that you've done your integrative medicine, of course, I've heard that when individuals start on the Ritalin or the Prozac, it is very difficult to wean them off of that. Is that true?
Okay, different medicines would have different things. So if you want to talk about like the antidepressant medicines, like Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Lexapro, Effexor, things like that.
Oh my gosh.
What's that?
I said, oh my gosh.
Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, and that's the other thing. I mean, it is true to say that, psychiatric medication is multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So if we're talking about antidepressant medicines, if somebody's on Prozac, it's not very hard to come off of it because it's got a long half-life. If somebody's taking Paxil or Effexor, for example, those ones have a shorter half-life. So if people, come off them too quickly, they often may feel flu-like or dizzy or spacey or have kind of a withdrawal reaction. So there's sort of the physically coming off the medication, but then there's also, do the symptoms come back? In my experience, working with people with depression or anxiety, if they go on medication, also hopefully therapy, also hopefully exercise and relaxation training and other things like that, when it comes time to come off of medication, the vast majority are able to come off, about 9 to 12 months later when they're doing well. The vast majority are able to come off and there's no problem. A small percentage have a significant recurrence of their depression or anxiety. I think of this sort of like asthma. I mean, if somebody has bad asthma, let's say in the Canadian winters, playing hockey, they get asthma, they're coughing, they're wheezing and all of that, they may need their puffers a lot. And then if, the season changes or they're doing better, if they stop their puffer, a good percentage are going to be fine for a good long time, but a small percentage are just going to have their asthma back again and they may need their puffer again, right? So it's the same sort of thing. When it comes to the ADHD medications, generally speaking, there's a small percentage of people who do almost develop a bit of a tolerance and the dose needs to be increased and it becomes a problem. But that's a very small percentage. Like in over a decade of practice, I've probably had 2 or 3 that I've been concerned that's really happening. Most of the time, people are stable with the dose. It's helpful. If people, the stimulant medications, the ones that are mostly used for ADHD, medicines like Adderall, Vyvanse, Concerta, things like that, and they're sort of new improved from Ritalin. If people stop them, and many people do, people don't always stick with their medicine, obviously. They may feel a bit more tired for a couple of days because it often increases energy a little bit during the day. And it may cause a little bit of insomnia. So they may feel a little more tired. They may be a little more hungry because medicines can lower appetite. But generally, they don't go through, major withdrawals. But I will tell you, if the ADHD medicine is helping and they stop it, they don't focus well anymore and their ADHD is there. Sort of like I'm wearing these glasses to see. If I take my glasses off, my eyes are blurry still. No matter how many years I wear the glasses for, my eyes don't automatically fix themselves. And, for many people with ADHD, it is a lifelong thing. So, for my own ADHD treatment, I take a low dose of ADHD medicine. I find it helpful. It makes a difference. It does give me a little bit of side effects. It's a little bit harder to fall asleep at night, but I'm still okay. And I'm doing some exercise, working on sleep and lifestyle things as well. So, but if by chance I happen to forget a dose, which almost never happens, I do feel a little more tired that day. But it's not like I'm going through withdrawal, if that makes sense.
A question had come in here for you, asking, are there herbal remedies?
Right. There are some. When it comes to we're talking about ADHD, right?
I would assume both because it seems like an overall question here.
Okay. What I would suggest is somebody's interested in that, by all means, talk to a holistic practitioner, whether it's a naturopathic doctor or, a medical doctor who does this work or something like that. When it comes to depression, there are supplements like St. John's wort that has reasonable data that it's helpful. There are other supplements like SAMe, S-A-M-E, and that can be helpful as well. When it comes to, and even for anxiety, there's L-theanine, or inositol, those can be helpful. When it comes to ADHD, probably the best data is for fish oil supplements, omega-3 fatty acids. They are essential, meaning our bodies don't make them. So we need to take them in with our diet or supplements. And they're mostly in fish, but most of us don't eat that much fish because we're, in North America and there's concerns about mercury and all of that. So if you get a high quality mercury-free omega-3 fish oil, that can be helpful. Better to have more EPA than DHA. Those are the active ingredients. And if you go to a pharmacy or a natural food store with some supplements, usually you can see omega-3 for heart or joints, and those usually have more DHA than EPA. And then if you go to the ones for brain, usually they have more EPA.
So how is that regulated though? Is that do they regulate it in the fish oil itself? Like
how much is in it?
Yes. How are they able to balance the difference between the two? Like one that is better for your joints and one that is, you know.
So, that's mostly marketing, right? But it relates to the fact that to get the fish oils, they have to process it from the fish, right? Then they have to extract the mercury and any contaminants, and you want to get one that's pharmaceutical grade and has had that sort of work done, and then they can put together the formulation they want. And the tricky thing about fish oils or omega-3s is when you look at the pill bottle, it'll say 1,000 milligrams per pill, but you have to flip it on its side and read the label because it may be 1,000 milligrams for the whole pill, but it may only have 100 milligrams of EPA and 50 milligrams of DHA, or vice versa. Excuse me. The research for ADHD suggests that people need between 800 to 1,000 milligrams of the active ingredients per day. So, and you need to take it for 3 to 6 months to get the benefits. So, if you're taking one of those weaker ones that doesn't have a lot, you're going to need to take like 8 or 10 pills or, 5 or 8 pills a day. If you get a higher concentration one, then you can get the benefits. So they can sort of put it together. And research shows DHA is better for joints and heart. EPA is better for brain. One last comment, just because, sometimes vegetarians don't want to have fish or fish oils. There are vegetable sources of omega-3s like flax. The issue is they are a shorter chain fatty acid, and they can only get into the brain if an enzyme in the body expands that, adds a little chain to it so it becomes a long chain fatty acid. And interestingly, there's been at least one study that showed that boys with ADHD have less of that enzyme compared to boys who don't have ADHD. So it's probably worth for ADHD, assuming your diet and beliefs allow it, to take actual fish oils rather than the vegetable source. The vegetable sources are very healthy. They're anti-inflammatory. They're good for the heart and the joints and health overall. Probably good for the brain too, insofar as dementia and Alzheimer's. But when it comes to ADHD, it's better to have the fish oils themselves.
That's really interesting. Now, with the flax oil, does it also have the balance of the EPA and DHA?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I know it has both. I think it may actually have more, I think it's ALA, which your body then converts. I'd have to go back and look at the science. It's one of those sort of biochemistry, diagrams where, ALA gets converted to this, it gets converted to that and broken down. But I think it's more ALA, and it may be a little more predominance of DHA. I'm not 100%. I'd have to double check.
Interesting. But our bodies naturally don't actually take it in, absorb it in as well as a fish oil.
To get into the brain, correct. Now, I think if people want to take flax or want to take a vegetable-based one, it's still anti-inflammatory. It's still good for you. It's still healthy. And that may improve ADHD. But if you actually look at randomized controlled trials where people got either fish oils or a placebo and they didn't know which they were getting, omega-3s, fish oils have data that they're helpful.
Isn't that interesting? As I was growing up, my father believed in cod liver oil.
Right.
And not in a pill form in those days.
Right. Well, and the oils are better absorbed and you'll get more out of them. The issue is, if you're talking about the liver of a cod, what does most of the detoxifying for our bodies? Our livers, right? So if the cod's floating around in some river or ocean with a lot of pollution, it's going to concentrate and accumulate in the liver. So If you were going to take cod liver oil now, I'm not saying you are, that's your story. But if somebody was going to take it now, you'd really want to make sure it's gone through stringent testing from a reliable source, that you've cleared the pollution out of it.
Yes. Well, with everything now, including our food, our vegetables, we have to be so. I mean, you can only be cautious to a certain point, but still, it's. Well,
let me tell you something about food. There was a big study, or no, actually, right around the time I went to this integrative medicine training course, there was a news report on one of the major news, CNN or whatever, that a study showed organic foods had no increased nutritional value compared to conventional foods. And they went on to say how the marketing had done it, and it was what a waste of money and everything else. It's like they forgot about the fact that the organic foods don't have all the extra chemicals and pollution. That's the main reason to look at organic foods. And there is an organization, I know I talked about cell phones, but I want to find this for a reason. There is actually an app for that. There is an organization that looks at foods that are a problem, that have a lot of pollution, and they published the Dirty Dozen.
Oh, it's not the EWP, is it?
Yes, that's it.
EWPs. Oh, they're great.
Right. So,
yes.
For families that are, not sure about going fully organic or whatever, if you're looking at what you can do, and there's an app, right? I have it on my Android right here. It's the Dirty Dozen, and it lists, so apples. And, of course, the ones that were at the top of the list were all the ones I love the most, right?
Oh, so no.
Apple,
which one?
Celery, bell peppers, peaches isn't my favorite, but strawberries. Out of those top 4 were mine. So as soon as I found this out, it's like organic only for apple, celery, bell peppers, and strawberries, right? Also grapes, lettuce, cucumbers, blueberries. I mean, I was like 8 of the top 12 were my top favorites, right? And far better to spend an extra couple dollars and not start accumulating a whole bunch of chemicals in your body. Like, our bodies weren't designed to be filtering and dealing with all the chemicals in our environment that we're doing now, that we throw at our bodies. So, you could go full organic. Not everybody's able to financially or lifestyle wise, but if you get the list of the Dirty Dozen and try to avoid those, that can be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Here, I think you need to move to LA. If those are your
favorite, eat organic, and it'll be perfect.
It is magnificent. Or also here they have organic, and then they have the pesticide free as well, which is is equal in that manner to us out here. But, of course, as you know, the greens and the fruit that is out here, it's magnificent. And I'm very much of a fruit person, so I'm a frugivore, I think. And, all the blueberries and the raspberries and the strawberries, I mean, they're basically almost year round. So, see, you have to move out here. But what people have really started doing is growing their own vegetables. That's what they've really started to do, because then they're certain it's the organic soil, heirloom seeds, organic heirloom seeds from, so that tomatoes actually taste like tomatoes again.
Shocking.
It is shocking. It is shocking. So I think that's another way, because I do believe, I think my family is also starting to grow their vegetable gardens and everything in Canada, though it's different kinds of vegetables. But you really, when you think of it, it doesn't take a lot to feed a family if you're eating right. And that's what I've noticed, from the times and growing up with the refined foods. I was talking to somebody about, do you remember those, well, maybe it's before your time, those Pop-Tarts and things like that. Just pop it in the morning. You're going to school with this really high fructose base.
It's just full of refined wheat, sugar, glaze. I don't, and then they'll say like 2 essential vitamins and minerals or something, right? That makes it good. Right.
And I mean, that's the era I grew up in. And, to shift from that into where I'm at now, it's amazing how, because when your food sources like your vegetables or your meat is cleaner, and you are, taking in more grains instead of white rice, it's like a brown rice, or quinoa, which has become more and more popular now. When you're taking in the grains, you actually don't end up eating as much.
Right. And you don't get hungry 90 minutes later the same way you did.
Correct.
Right?
And so I find that our food bill is actually getting less.
Right.
So that we can afford the organic. We can afford, to go to the market and pay a little higher price for fruit that was picked yesterday, for eggs that were actually collected today.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing.
It is because we find that we really don't end up eating as much as we used to. And grain really cooks up in a whole different manner.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a little hint for those who might be considering to move towards that area. It's not that much more expensive in the long run.
Yeah.
And it saves on the doctor's bills, I must say.
Yeah, well, that's the ultimate thing. And, the unfortunate thing is most people wait until a catastrophic medical illness till they start to take care of things.
Yes.
And really, what develops the catastrophic medical illness? It's really day after day, week after week, year after year, decade after decade of not taking enough care. So yes, little changes. Mm-hmm. Choosing 4 or 5 of the foods off the dirty dozen list and getting them organic or pesticide free can make a difference. Mm-hmm. Eating more grains instead of refined sugars, exercising regularly makes a big difference.
So between all that, you recommend for your clients, your patients, your clients, and those out there who are listening, it's really about, on all levels, is what we call, the balance of body, mind, spirit. Because I also heard you mention that word, the spiritual practice, which doesn't, I always have to clarify that because a lot of people think that means a religion.
Right.
An organized religion, which a spiritual practice is not that. It is a practice. Right. So you recommend that now to your patients and clients?
I do. I talk about, lifestyle insofar as diet, sleep, exercise. Insofar as the spiritual side, I'm not always addressing that with the teens I'm working with in that, but I do think it is important, and many families do think of it as, are we going to church? Well, for some people, going to church is a spiritual experience, and for some people it isn't. And it may just be about who has the nicest dress or the nicest car out front of the building. And, and I'm not trying to criticize anything or anybody, right? But it is ultimately about one individual's spiritual connection to their creator or the higher power or whatever they believe in. And having that sort of practice is important. So I do like to discuss the whole holistic thing. Certainly there are times where we're talking about, do we need to just adjust a medication? Is this too many milligrams or not enough milligrams? But it is also important to look at the context of screen time, exercise, food, diet, et cetera. So I do like to, and I encourage everybody to think about those things for balance overall.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's wonderful to hear you say that because so often it's like, well, here's your medication and see me in a week or see me in a month and we'll adjust it if you need adjusting then, as opposed to encouraging, really that's what I keep hearing from you. You're so encouraging. Your approach, it's magnificent.
Well, thank you.
So as we have a few more minutes left, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience, Kenny?
I'll share a couple of other sort of more non-medication approaches around ADHD, and that relates to neurofeedback and CogMed working memory training. So there are a couple of things out now. So neurofeedback is essentially a biofeedback process where the practitioners put electrodes on the brain, or on the head, rather, not on the brain, on the scalp, measure brain electricity. And essentially what happens is when we're alert, awake, and paying attention, our brain waves are very quick. When we get into deep relaxation or daydreaming, our brain waves slow down a lot. And people with ADHD, when they're supposed to be quick with thinking, they may actually be quick and dip down into the slower brainwave pattern. So neurofeedback is a process where people go for multiple sessions. It can be 30 to 40 sessions. And they get trained in almost in an unconscious way, like a biofeedback process, to take their brainwaves from being slow and bring them up to focus when they need them to be in focus. So there's more and more research being done on that, Different communities have, either a lot of practitioners or no practitioners. People have to research it and look for it. But it is a great natural approach to help people without medication, or it can be done with medication, and people can often lower their dose of medication. So that's one thing. Another that's interesting is CogMed, COGMED. And that's a software program that's been researched to improve working memory. Now, working memory is an executive function, and executive functions are the highest level thinking and planning skills that we use. And it's often a challenge for people with ADHD or other conditions. It can be an issue for people with memory problems or depression or even medical illnesses if they're feeling quite sick. And so their working memory is holding a little bit of information in your mind to problem solve. And so this program, people see it through a practitioner who's trained to do the research, to do the work in the same way the research has it. And essentially, it's a software program done on the computer at home, 30 to 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 5 weeks. And there's been measured improvement in working memory and, to some extent, focus and functioning. So those are some other things that can be options. I always think, what are the side effects, right? I mean, if somebody's taking a medication, there's a chance that there's headaches or stomach aches or not sleeping or other things like that. When somebody's using something like neurofeedback or CogMed, they're not really going to get stomach aches or trouble sleeping. Probably not going to get headaches from it. But they do have to spend time and they do have to spend money. And even if a treatment works 90% of the time, if you're in the 10% it doesn't work for, most of the time you can't get a money back guarantee. So people need to do their research and be aware of it. Ask the tough questions. Ask for research-based material, not just testimonials where people talk about how great it was with their child. That's useful and helpful, but it's even better if you can see that there's research done in peer-reviewed journals proving the treatment helps. But if you gather all your information and say, you know what, I'm willing to invest the time and invest the money because I think this may help, it's worth considering and trying those treatments.
Hey, tell me, is there groups like that they would be testing certain exercises on that people could get involved with? Like when they're doing the study period?
Could people get into clinical trials
clinical trials.
This? It would really depend locally what's going on. I mean, most medical schools do have some researchers, but I know in Toronto, there's nobody doing research in, University of Toronto is one of Canada's biggest medical schools, whatever. There's nobody doing research on neurofeedback, for example. So, I'm not sure, people would have to see, they'd have to connect with local resources.
And see what's out there.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kenny Handelman. You're just a wealth of information. I know that there's certain areas that you could go on and on about as well.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I love supporting your community, and thanks for all the great work you do.
Oh, thank you so much for honoring us. And I would like to let our audience know to contact Dr. Kenny Handelman. His website is drdrkenny, KENNY.com, where you can also follow his blog. His Twitter handle is @drkenny, DRKENNY, and his Facebook is also, but full name, Dr. Dr. Kenny Handelman, spelled HANDELMAN. So it's Dr. Kenny Handelman. And he also has a podcast, which is really wonderful. And we definitely would suggest you have a listen. And that is ADHDpodcast.com. And if you have a moment to check out his book, Attention Difference Disorder. And that's one book that I would really like to read because I have just by the way you titled it, Kenny, I have to tell you, it for me, it crosses. It's not just about the, ADD. Just by reading the title, I went, oh, that's going to be such a good book.
Thank you.
And of course, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us on this new platform of education and information. We are grateful for your continuous support and look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can support you better. We invite you to join us live on Tuesdays for Magical Medical Tour at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1:30 Eastern Time. Wednesdays for Trinity of Life at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, followed every other week with Flowing into Awareness with Anatara. And until next time, namaste.